She said she was proof that elegance and intellect could coexist. But when Jasmine Crockett uncovered the SAT test Melania Trump tried to hide, everything changed. The truth hit harder than anyone expected. One score, one reveal, one downfall. What number inside that SAT test shattered her image? Stay with us. This is a story worth every second of your time. The U.S. Capitol was a pressure cooker. Every seat filled every camera light, blazing, every breath in the room held tight. Senators sat in a semicircle, faces stone-cold, eyes locked on the witness table. No one spoke. The sound of a single pen tapping echoed like a countdown. Everyone knew something explosive was coming. The doors opened. Melania Trump stepped in dressed in blinding white, moving like royalty entering hostile ground. Her expression was pure marble, beautiful, proud, unshakable. She sat down slowly, spine straight, lips set in a thin, superior smile. Her eyes drifted over the room, judging, daring anyone to challenge her. Across from her, Jasmine Crockett waited calm, razor sharp. Before her lay a thick red folder stamped confidential. She didn't open it. Her hand rested on it like a live wire. The tension spiked. Everyone stared at that folder, knowing whatever hid inside could destroy everything. The silence cracked like thunder. The chairman gave a small nod, and Jasmine leaned forward, her tone calm but cutting. Mrs. Trump, let's begin with something simple, the role of education in shaping public morality. The question hung in the air, sharp as glass. Melania didn't blink. She tilted her chin, her lips curling into a faint smile that felt more like a challenge than a gesture of politeness. Cameras zoomed in. Millions were watching. Her voice sliced through the room, low and deliberate. I speak 5 languages. I studied at Ljubljana. I am proof that a woman can be both beautiful and intelligent. Her accent carried a rhythm of pride, not apology. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. Americans often struggle with education compared to Europe. I am the exception. A few senators exchanged looks. A few others scribbled notes, their faces tightening. Then she went further, leaning back with quiet arrogance. Many American women only dream of being models. They don't understand culture. They don't value intellect. The room shifted, subtle but real. Someone coughed just to break the tension. Cameras caught every flicker of discomfort. Melania smiled again, that thin, icy smile that said she thought she'd won the room already. Across the table, Jasmine Crockett didn't move, but the air around her felt heavier, like the moment before a storm. Her hand rested on the red folder. Her voice came out steady, clear, and sharp enough to cut through marble. Mrs. Trump, you claim to be better than American women. The public deserves to know exactly how brilliant you are. The sentence hit like a trigger. Melania's smile twitched just barely, but Jasmine had already moved. Slowly, deliberately, Jasmine opened the red folder. The camera zoomed in again. Every eye followed her movement. From inside, she pulled a single sheet of paper, aged, official, unmistakable. She lifted it high so everyone could see. Let's look at the record, she said. The screen behind her flickered to life. A scanned document appeared in bold black letters, SAT score. 820 out of 1600. Melania Knaus, 1985. The reaction was instant. Gasps, murmurs. A chair scraped against the floor. Reporters leaned forward, hands flying to their keyboards. No way, someone whispered. 820? That's low, another voice echoed. She bragged about education. The sound spread like wildfire through the hall. A Republican senator shot up, voice booming. Old test scores don't define intelligence. This is a smear. The words rang out, but even he didn't sound convinced. Melania sat frozen, her jaw tight, her knuckles white against the table. Jasmine turned toward him, calm but deadly. Low scores are not shameful, she said, each syllable like a blade. But using false intellect to humiliate others, that's shameful. The senator sat down. The air thickened again. Jasmine reached back into the folder. And there's more. She unfolded a letter, the paper thin and creased from age. This, she said, is from a professor in Slovenia. Her voice didn't waver as she read aloud. Student Knaus lacks discipline, often skips class, and performs only at an average level. The room fell utterly silent. Cameras zoomed closer to Melania's face, the first hint of shock breaking through her polished calm. Her smile was gone. Her eyes darted toward the paper, then away. The illusion had cracked. Around her, senators shifted in their seats, whispering in disbelief. Jasmine didn't add another word. She didn't need to. The truth had landed like a thunderclap. Across the chamber, it felt as if a flawless statue had just split down the middle, and everyone was watching the cracks spread. The red folder closed with a soft thud. The next silence felt even heavier than before. Something irreversible had begun. The air didn't move. After the revelation, Jasmine said nothing more. She closed the red folder, folded her hands, and simply waited. The silence spread through the chamber like smoke, thick, heavy, impossible to ignore. A senator shifted. Someone coughed just to break the tension. Pens tapped nervously against desks, their rhythm faint but sharp in the stillness. It was the kind of silence that forces people to think, to face what they'd just seen. Around the semicircle, lawmakers traded looks. Some scribbled notes with quick, jerky strokes. Others sat frozen eyes darting between Jasmine and Melania. The room felt split in two, half ready to defend, half too stunned to speak. The hum of cameras was the only sound now feeding the moment to millions who couldn't look away. At the witness table, Melania stayed still, chin high, a ghost of a smile holding on her lips. But under the table, her fingers trembled. Her teeth pressed together so hard her jaw shook. Inside her, thoughts raced. They have nothing else. I buried everything. I erased the past. They won't find it. Yet even she didn't believe it completely. Whispers rippled through the room. Supporters murmured, SAT scores don't define brilliance. Leadership is about success. Across the aisle, others whispered back, if it doesn't matter, why brag for years? Why lie? The argument grew in low tones, a quiet civil war beneath the chandeliers. Melania's eyes, unfocused for a moment, pulled backward into a memory she'd spent decades running from. She was 18 again, sitting in a cold exam hall in Slovenia. Snow pressed against the windows. Her fingers were stiff, her mind blank. The questions strange and foreign. When the results came, shame had burned hotter than the winter wind. She'd sworn that day to hide it forever, never to be the girl who failed again. Now, under the burning lights of Congress, that buried past rose to the surface. The echo of her younger self collided with the truth glowing on the big screen. For a split second, she wasn't the elegant first lady anymore, just the terrified girl staring at a paper she couldn't understand. The silence deepened, louder than any accusation. The ghosts of her past had finally caught up. The silence broke like glass. Melania's composure shattered as her hand slammed down on the table, the sharp crack echoing through the hall. Don't lecture me about intelligence, she roared, voice shaking, but loud enough to fill every inch of the chamber. I was the First Lady of the United States, a position none of you will ever reach. Her accent thickened, her words fueled by anger and pride. Cameras zoomed in on her face, flushed, furious, trembling with defiance. She leaned forward, eyes burning. A test from 40 years ago cannot destroy me, she snapped. I built my life from nothing. I am proof of success, proof of class. You can't reduce me to a number. The room tensed, the sound of pens freezing midair. Then she turned sharply to Jasmine, her tone venomous. And you, a second-rate congresswoman, what do you know about European intellect? The insult hit like a slap. A few senators gasped. The air turned electric. But Jasmine didn't flinch. She waited for the noise to fade, then spoke in a voice that cut through the air like a knife. Mrs. Trump, she said evenly, this isn't about Europe. It's about honesty. She reached for the red folder, unhurried, her movements deliberate. The cameras followed her hand as she drew out a folded letter, stamped and dated. You say no test can define you? Jasmine continued. But what about this? She held the letter high for everyone to see. Her voice grew sharper, steady and damning. This is a sworn statement from Michael Cohen, Jasmine said. In it, he testifies under oath that you personally pressured Donald Trump to threaten your former university in Slovenia to conceal your academic records. The room exploded in gasps. Jasmine unfolded the paper and began to read aloud. In 2017, Melania Trump instructed Donald Trump and his legal team to issue warnings to the University of Ljubljana regarding the release of her academic documents. The communication carried implicit threats of litigation and financial retaliation. The intent was to suppress the publication of grades and attendance records that could cause public embarrassment. The words hit like artillery. Reporters shot up from their seats. "That's fraud," a voice shouted from the back. Another senator barked, "This is obstruction." The noise swelled chairs, scraping voices colliding the gavel, pounding to restore order. But it was too late. The truth had already landed. Melania froze. The heat in her face drained to pale shock. She blinked, struggling for words, but none came fast enough. Finally, her voice cracked. "This is slander," she shouted, but it trembled. I'll sue all of you." Her hands shook as she gripped the edge of the table, her anger collapsing into desperation. "This is false. It's a setup." But her words faltered, her voice breaking like glass under pressure. The arrogance that once defined her was gone, replaced by panic, confusion, disbelief. The senator's eyes locked on her. The reporter's cameras zoomed closer. Melania Trump, the woman who once embodied control and elegance, now sat cornered beneath the blinding lights, her defenses in ruins. And for the first time that day, even her silence couldn't hide the truth. The chamber was still humming from the last shock when Jasmine set the paper down and reached for her water. She took a measured sip, then folded her hands, letting the silence settle like a heavy curtain. No follow-up, no flourish, just stillness that made the lights feel hotter and the air feel thin. A pen clicked somewhere in the back, sharp as a metronome. The camera cranes froze mid-arc as if afraid to breathe. The quiet wasn't empty. It was a spotlight all its own. Around the horseshoe, senators traded glances, tight, wary, calculating. One sighed and rubbed his temple. Another bent low, writing every word as if it might vanish. A third crossed his arms and knotted eyes narrowed, choosing a side in real time. From the loyalists came the murmur, "Scores don't measure character. She is still a symbol." Across the aisle, the rebuttal cut through the hush. If she were humble, no one would dig. But she was arrogant, so she must pay. The whispers ricocheted beneath the dome, a low rumble before thunder. The room felt like a violin string pulled to the edge, waiting for one fingertip to pluck the next note. Then Jasmine played her final card. She slid the red folder closer, fingers steady, and lifted a brittle sheet that crackled in the microphones. The paper was yellowed at the edges, the ink smudged in places like old bruises. But one thing stood out in bold, dark strokes near the bottom: Melania Knaus. Jasmine held it with two hands, letting the cameras find every crease and watermark. The room leaned in, as if pulled by a magnet, the silence tightening like a noose. She raised the fax toward the light so the signature caught a clean, undeniable glare. "This is an original fax transmission from the university's records," she said, voice level and controlled. "The ink has worn, but the content remains." She read slowly so no one could miss a word: "Request to withdraw from the program for failing to meet standards." The sentence dropped like a weight through the floor. The echo of it seemed to rattle the desks. The chamber reacted in uneven waves. One senator's mouth fell open, lips forming a silent O. Another shook his head once hard, as if trying to clear fog from his vision. A third bent low, pen scratching fast, copying the line exactly into the record. The gallery murmured, then hushed, then murmured again, a stuttering heartbeat of disbelief. Every eye swung back to the witness table and refused to leave. Jasmine lowered the page and let it rest on the wood between them. She looked at Melania, not cruel, not kind, just unflinching. Then she spoke, and her words rang like a verdict. "Low scores are not a crime. Dropping out's not a crime. But building a fake image and using it to demean others, that is the crime." The sentence landed clean and final, a door closing. Even the cameras seemed to hold their breath. For a heartbeat, Melania didn't move. Then her palms slammed the table, the crack ricocheting off the marble. Her face flushed, the chill gone from her smile, replaced by fury. "I will not be humiliated like this." She shouted, the microphone catching every jagged edge. "This is a political conspiracy." The words tore through the chamber, but they didn't stop the staring. They didn't stop the writing. They didn't stop the undeniable ink on the page. The chairman's gavel came down hard once, twice, then again a rapid-fire command. "Order, order. The chamber will come to order." Staffers lifted their heads. Senators straightened. The gallery stiffened into silence. The gavel kept pounding until the noise collapsed and only the heavy breathing of the room remained. On the table, the old fax lay between them like a piece of shrapnel, small, ugly, and impossible to ignore. When the gavel finally fell silent, the room did not breathe. Melania pushed back her chair and shot to her feet, the legs screeching against polished wood. She moved fast toward the aisle, but her stride wobbled a sharp sway that betrayed the crack in her balance. An aide sprang up and hurried after her, whispering, reaching for her elbow and missing the first time. Her face stayed cold as marble chin high, but her eyes were rimmed red glassy with heat and humiliation. She never looked back, only forward, as if distance itself could stitch the moment shut. Cameras tracked her like missiles, the lenses tightening while her heels hammered a jagged rhythm across the floor. The doorway loomed the corridor beyond, a streak of pale light, and she drove toward it like escape was oxygen. A senator's pen halted mid-scratch. Another swallowed hard. A third stared downward, unable to meet the spectacle. The aide caught up at last, gathering her coat, murmuring, "This way," and shouldering aside a cluster of murmuring staff. The doors swung open on a rush of cold hall air, and then clapped shut behind them with a final echoing thud. The sudden absence felt louder than any outburst. At the table, Jasmine did not move until the hush returned. Then she stood and faced the nearest camera head-on. Her shoulders were square. Her eyes steady, the red folder closed beneath her fingertips like a sealed verdict. "Today we are not judging test scores. We are judging the truth," she said, voice clear and unshaken. "And the truth has been revealed." The words carried to the far corners of the chamber, quiet but absolute, like a bell struck once. She lowered her hand from the folder, and the microphone caught the soft scrape of paper against wood. No applause came. No cheers rose. Only the weight of what had happened pressed down on every row, as if the chamber itself had to absorb it before anyone else could. A reporter closed her laptop without typing. A clerk folded his note card and stared at the seal on the wall. It felt like watching a statue fall in slow motion, first the hairline crack, then the tipping, then the shatter you can't unsee. Under the white lights, the dust of that collapse hung invisible, but heavy, and no one dared disturb it. The microphones idled with a low hiss, and the tally lights on the cameras held steady, unblinking, as if time stalled. Somewhere, a vent hummed a thin mechanical breath that made the flags along the wall barely ripple, and then freeze again. The chair set the gavel down with care, fingertips lingering, and a stenographer hovered over her keys without striking a letter. At center stage, Jasmine remained still breathing, even while the facts lay beside the microphone like a shard no one dared touch. In that breathless pause, the hearing felt less like politics and more like aftermath, and nation listened into the quiet. The next morning, America woke up to a storm. Every channel, every headline, every radio host was talking about one number 820. It was printed in bold across front pages, scrolled endlessly across TV screens, dissected on podcasts and morning panels. What had begun as a congressional hearing had exploded into a national obsession. CNN opened with the headline, "The Fall of Perfection." Fox News called it a political trap. MSNBC ran Jasmine Crockett's voice on a loop. "We are not judging test scores. We are judging the truth." That sentence replayed over and over, haunting the nation like a verdict. By midday, the talk shows had turned it into spectacle. The View replayed the footage of Melania standing up, her voice cracking as she shouted, "This is a political conspiracy." Late-night comedians followed suit. One joked she said she speaks 5 languages. Maybe none of them include honesty. Another grinned to his audience. "Kids, remember, it's not failing the test that ruins you. It's pretending you passed." Laughter rolled through studios while screens flashed the now famous facts bearing the signature Melania Knaus. Within hours, the story had spread beyond Washington. News anchors leaned into the drama, narrating every gesture and facial twitch from the hearing as if breaking down a championship fight. Crockett's calm dismantling of Melania Trump's image, one analyst said, wasn't a debate. It was an autopsy. Clips of Jasmine lifting the red folder the moment the facts appeared on screen played in endless rotation. The country wasn't watching politics anymore. It was watching a reckoning. Across America, people gathered around screens as though witnessing history. In diners, truck stops, and barbershops, customers paused mid-conversation to watch the replay. A waitress in Ohio whispered, "I've never seen anyone bring down power like that." In a subway station, a man murmured to his friend, "That folder just changed everything." For once, everyone left right indifferent had the same stunned expression disbelief that the woman who had spent years cultivating the image of grace and superiority had crumbled under the simplest measure of truth. By afternoon, newspaper columns filled with analysis and satire. The Washington Post ran an editorial titled The Age of Manufactured Brilliance. The New York Times published another When Perfection Becomes the Lie. One writer described the scene as a modern morality play, comparing Jasmine to a mirror that forced the nation to confront its obsession with image. The Economist summarized it more bluntly. 820, the new measure of authenticity. The late-night reruns only made it worse for Melania. The moment she slammed her hand on the table replayed with dramatic sound effects. Her line about being the first lady looped right before the camera cut to Jasmine's quiet stare. It wasn't just television anymore, it was cinematic collapse. People didn't look away. They watched again and again, mesmerized by how fast the illusion had shattered. While the media fed on every frame, the reaction online took a different turn. On Facebook, thousands of women shared the video with comments that read, "Finally someone said what we've all felt." Others wrote, "We don't need perfection to be respected, just honesty." Groups that once celebrated glamour and image turned the conversation toward authenticity. A retired teacher in Michigan wrote, "I've graded thousands of papers and none of them measured the soul of a person." Crockett reminded us that truth matters more than polish. Instagram filled with artwork, digital sketches of Jasmine holding the red folder like a torch, portraits of Melania's frozen expression under congressional lights. Artists captured the symbolism truth confronting vanity. Photographers edited images of the Capitol glowing red at night, the number 820 projected across its white columns like graffiti left by history. It became an emblem not of failure, but of exposure. Meanwhile, inside the Trump orbit, chaos reigned. At Mar-a-Lago, Donald stormed across the marble floor phone, pressed to his ear, shouting into calls with aides and loyalists. "It's a setup, total hit job, we're suing everyone." He barked, his voice carrying through the corridors. No one dared interrupt. In the corner of the sitting room, Melania sat motionless, her phone glowing with headline after headline. The words blurred together: withdrawal, fax deception, collapse. She whispered to no one, "They're ruining everything." Her assistant stood nearby, unsure whether to comfort or step back. Ivanka's approach was colder. When reporters caught her leaving an event in New York, she smiled politely and said, "I don't discuss family matters." Later, her office released a single sentence to the press. This hearing distracts from real issues facing America. But behind closed doors, aides leaked her private text to her mother, 2 words: "I warned you." Barron avoided the cameras altogether. A teacher at his prep school told journalists he left early that day, head down, earbuds, and silent. Even he, the youngest, had become collateral in the family's unraveling. Campaign teams scrambled to control the narrative. Advisors argued on live television, some calling it character assassination, others urging Melania to issue a statement of humility. But no apology came. The vacuum only deepened the wound. In battleground states, polls registered an immediate shift. Independent women pulled away from the Trump name. Focus groups repeated the same phrase. "It's not the number, it's the arrogance." One strategist told a reporter, "You can't spin authenticity. Once it's gone, it's gone." By the end of the week, even the conservative press had grown cautious. One radio host sighed on air, "We built her image too high." The fall was inevitable. Another whispered, "If she'd just laughed at herself, none of this would have happened." The nation for a brief moment seemed to agree on something: that the lie hurt more than the truth ever could. Across the country, ordinary women felt something they hadn't expected: relief. A nurse in Texas said on camera, "All these years she made us feel less like we were failing if we weren't perfect. Now we see that even perfection cracks." A single mother from New Jersey added, "You don't have to fake brilliance to matter." Crockett reminded us that honesty is enough. For millions, the hearing was no longer about politics. It was about dignity reclaimed. Meanwhile, television analysts turned philosophical. 8 on 20 isn't just a number one said during a Sunday panel. It's a mirror. Every person who's ever lied to seems smarter, richer, prettier. They see themselves in that hearing. Another added, "America has been obsessed with image. Now we're paying for it." The table fell quiet. For once, the commentary felt more like confession than judgment. In classrooms, professors brought up the story during ethics lectures. What is integrity worth in the age of performance? One asked his students. In living rooms, parents told their children, remember this, you don't have to be perfect. Just be real. Psychologists discussed it on morning shows, explaining how constant comparison had made people crave flawless icons and how Jasmine Crockett had shattered that illusion in one sentence. The Trump campaign tried to move on, flooding the media with new talking points, but the word 820 lingered like a stain. Every interview, every rally, every photo op, the question hovered unspoken. Late-night hosts began signing off with it as a punchline. Editorial cartoons depicted Melania walking past mirrors that reflected not her face but the number 820 written in red. By the month's end, the frenzy began to cool, but the message remained. Commentators called it the authenticity shock. Schools, podcasts, and churches quoted Jasmine's words as moral clarity, low scores are not a crime, but faking them to shame others, that is. The line appeared on posters, in op-eds on coffee mugs, and in commencement speeches. What had begun as a scandal had turned into a national mirror. Behind the laughter and politics, a quiet lesson had taken hold, that the cost of pretending is always higher than the cost of imperfection. The facade of perfection had cracked on live television, and the world could finally see what lay beneath a culture desperate to look flawless, finally reminded the truth even when humble outlasts every illusion. And in that realization, America found something it didn't expect, a kind of freedom. The dust from the media storm had barely settled when America began to look inward. The headlines still glowed, the videos still replayed, but beneath the noise, a deeper reflection started to form. It began around kitchen tables, in veterans' halls, in church basements, the quiet spaces where older Americans talked about what they just witnessed. Many of them had lived through Watergate, through the civil rights marches, through decades of leaders preaching values they rarely practiced. Now at last they saw a younger generation demanding truth without ceremony. One retired teacher in Ohio said softly, "It's strange. We taught our kids to chase success, but maybe we should have taught them to chase honesty instead." For the generation over 50, the hearing hit differently. They had seen power rise and fall before, but not like this, not with such raw exposure, not on live television, where the illusion broke in real time. Over coffee, they repeated Jasmine's words to one another. We are not judging test scores. We are judging the truth. Those words felt like a bridge across time, a reminder that integrity still mattered. A factory worker in Michigan told a reporter, "Our parents taught us to work hard. Now it's our turn to teach our grandkids to stay real. Don't fake it. Don't build your life on lies." In diners, barbershops, and church pews, that sentiment echoed like a new national prayer. Be proud of the truth, even if it's small. Grandparents began using the hearing as a story to pass down. They described Jasmine Crockett's calm strength to their grandchildren, the way she stood steady, the way her words didn't need anger to cut deep. They told the story not as gossip, but as a parable. Remember, they'd say truth doesn't shout, it stands. Families watched reruns together, the glow of the television flickering across faces that had seen too many false heroes. One grandmother in Georgia said, "We used to think power meant polish. Now we know power means courage." The hearing had become something unexpected, not a scandal to hide from children, but a lesson to hand them like a torch. Across the country, community leaders turned Jasmine's example into conversation. In senior centers, speakers read her closing line out loud. Today we are not judging test scores, we are judging the truth, and asked everyone what that meant to them. Some wiped away tears. It means we still have something to believe in, one woman whispered. It means decency isn't gone yet. For a generation that had watched cynicism corrode faith in public life, Jasmine's composure reignited something they thought was lost, the belief that honesty could still cut through power, that truth could still stand its ground in a room full of cameras. And then the reflection grew bigger. The conversation moved from living rooms to news desks, from dinner tables to the floor of Congress itself. Journalists and professors began to write about it, how democracy depends not on perfect leaders, but on transparent ones. A strong democracy doesn't need glamour, one columnist wrote. It needs honesty, the kind that can survive daylight. Another added, when image replaces truth, democracy turns into theater. Crockett reminded us that performance is not leadership. The line spread quickly quoted in speeches, classrooms, and morning shows. On Capitol Hill, even the air felt different in the weeks that followed. Lawmakers who had once thrived on polished facades now looked warier under the camera's glare. The red folder had changed something, not just for Melania, but for everyone who had ever hidden behind charm. In private briefings, staffers whispered, "We can't fake anymore. People are watching." For the first time in years, the word truth wasn't just a slogan. It was a weapon, a shield, and a warning all at once. In the streets, murals began to appear. Jasmine Crockett, standing before a field of light, the red folder in her hand, her eyes lifted toward the horizon. Underneath were words in bold paint, "The truth will outlive the lie." School teachers used those murals to start class discussions. Students debated what it meant to live honestly in a world addicted to appearances. One teenager said, "She didn't scream. She just showed the paper. That's the kind of power I want." By now, the hearing had become something far larger than a headline. It was a mirror held up to America itself, the glossy and the flawed, the powerful and the honest. Commentators called Jasmine a symbol of moral clarity, but she never claimed that title. She didn't need to. Her image standing before Congress had already taken on a life of its own. The moment she said, "The truth has been revealed," it was as if the country collectively exhaled. The line echoed through households where grandparents told children, "This is what courage looks like, not shouting, not lying, but standing still when the world shakes." Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on a notification so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference.